So if you would go ahead and state your name, what you're running for, and then the House district the area that it represents.
Yeah, okay. Nina Barnes, and I am running for House District 73. And it encompasses just this long skinny strip in Washington County. It goes from the new airport and kind of zigzags all the way up to the Iron County border through Little Valley, Washington City, a little bit of the fields where the Costco is. It jumps the freeway in Green Springs and Brio, and then goes up to Leeds and Silver Reef, and then up to that Iron County border.
Perfect, perfect. So Nina, you're a new, St. George is kind of or your area is kind of in a just interesting spot because there are going to be some new legislators. So both you and your opponent are brand new. Tell us a little bit about your background. What makes you prepared to run for this race?
Well, I'm really excited to be running. I feel like I've been preparing my whole life to run for this race. I just didn't know it. I am a mom, 5 kids, raised my kids in Southern Utah intentionally, and just actually became engaged because I was mad in Iron County, there was no playground. And so I organized a group and we've built a park there. It's called Park Discovery. And we spent a year and raised over $500,000 and got the city partnered with the city in solving our problem, had 10,000 volunteers show up. Wow. And we built that playground, and it stands today as this great tribute to what volunteers and the human spirit, a bunch of moms and dads can do. And so we built that playground. And after that, I just started looking at my representation, and I could go all the way to the President of the United States. And there just wasn't much diversity. The only difference is the president wasn't of our same faith. From my local, senators and council members and commissioners, governor, all the way up. So I decided that was kind of my call to action, and I ran and was on the city council for the next 8 years, and really got involved in all things in the city and community. And I've just kind of spent my life doing that since. If there's a project, whether a playground or a veterans park or recycling or trails, whatever it may be, my most recent ones are the Period Project. I brought that to Southern Utah. I just always, looked at needs and things we needed and jumped in. I served on the board of trustees at SUU, been the vice chair of the board of higher ed for the last 10 years, work on the Envision Utah board, and just so many other things that I'm just passionately involved in. So at this point, I want representation. And I think my district in Southern Utah needs a really strong champion and a voice.
Great, thank you. So really a long history with serving your community. I love that you did the work on the Period Project. That's going to be such a positive impact for so many girls, in the state, and excited that you led out on that. Let's talk a little bit about your district. St. George and that whole area. I got the pleasure of visiting in that area in last October, and seeing Tech Ridge, and I saw the vision. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. And I get really excited about the economy there. What gets you excited about the economy in St. George? What are you seeing?
Well, this district is the fastest growing city in the fastest growing county and the fastest growing state in the country. So I am in the heart of that. And I see it as so many possibilities, but also some really needed visionary steps as we navigate this. This is unprecedented growth. It's unbridled. We have many amazing local elected officials who are navigating things they just never could even imagine or be prepared for. So we have to be really, really intentional. And I'm also coming at it with lens from higher ed and post-secondary education and what that means and how quickly that's changing and how that needs to be disrupted in our state to meet the needs of this thriving community. We've had a lot of division down here with the Dixie name change. It's been horrible. It's completely divided a town and made so many think that, that campus is no longer for them simply because they put the name technology in it. In Utah, we have a lot of work to do on the Board of Higher Ed, and as Utahns changing what vocational or our tech schools are. There's this ownership of our vocational training institutions being the owner of technology, and it's just not the case. So we have to re-educate an entire state on what technology means, and that, you know, Utah Tech is not taking over vocational training. They're adding to a whole different level of technology. And these institutions are going to be the lifeline for the economy in the future in our workforce. So we've got to pivot on what that looks for. Many people in this community did not have a 4-year degree. 10 years ago, we had a 2-year college. So you have a lot of people who built lives here, but didn't need that degree. And it was okay, but that's no longer the case with housing and expenses and, you know, the growth. We need everyone to be prepared to contribute and earn a livable wage, and technology is the answer.
Fantastic. So, you know, one of the challenges that we're hearing from some of the tech companies in that area, you know, in that district, are housing affordability. There simply isn't enough, and what is available is quite expensive. What are your thoughts, and how do you think that the state should or shouldn't even help with housing?
Well, being from rural Utah, I'm always going to champion local control, that I want our solutions really dialed here. But there is a role for the state to play in this, and I see it's critical. I also, as you mentioned, just Tech Ridge, there's so many possibilities when you see what Isaac Barlow and what they're trying to do up there, and incorporate some of those housings, different sizes of housing, different levels of housing. And I think that that's really the great benefit, as I see technology influence rural communities in helping us look at lens and looking at solutions we may not have seen for ourselves. And so as I would look at the housing crisis in rural Utah, I would want to encourage infrastructures and assistance at a state level to look at some bigger, broader best practices that maybe those communities wouldn't see for themselves. And I think there's a possible way of doing that. I think that it's happening here with our ADUs and different ways of encouraging the zoning, some different possibilities with land use, whether federal or state. So there's a lot of roles that we can play in that. And I hope to be actively involved in those solutions.
Yeah, I mean, I recognize that that area is not, you know, we're seeing the same housing crunch on the Wasatch Front. I think what's in particular unique, and something that I learned, is water rights, and that, you know, there is no secondary water in that area. That's a big problem to solve. Is that something that you want to tackle with the legislature?
Yes, absolutely. You know, I say education and housing, you're hitting all these issues, but water is right there. We know just individually how critical water is for each one of us, but it's equally important for the economy of our entire region. And we have to address it. And, you know, for years we got away with some big plan, you know, the Lake Powell pipeline, and that was just all we talked about. But really, the solution with water is not going to be just one facet. It's got to be multifaceted. I have about 8 different issues that I like to talk about water, and one I'm really excited is rural Utah and Republicans, conservatives who typically don't like talking about education and conservation. This is finally something that we're willing to talk about, and we need to. It certainly is in the conservative Republican platform, and we need to be better stewards with these resources. And so there are some really exciting things happening. Last year, St. George City started just merely an education campaign about slow the flow. They reduced water usage in St. George by 8%. People, you know, rural Utahns really like that. They don't like mandates. They don't want requirements. But I feel like they're really good people down here. If they're educated and informed, they'll make better choices in conservation. But certainly, you mentioned the secondary water is critical, but we need help from the state on the infrastructure to do that. You know, most people down here can go in the backyard and drink out of the hose, you know, that's just no longer sustainable for us. But we need help with that infrastructure from the state, and also with the Lake Powell pipeline. There's a lot of others. We send way more water down the river than it's allotted, but we don't have places to hold it and to retain it. And we're looking at a few of those options, and we've got to do better. Water's cheap. You know, we subsidize water, and I don't know that we could continue to do that. And I think you'd have a lot more prudent usage if we were paying the cost of water. So there's a whole list of things we can be doing and need to be doing and need to look at each one of those. But it will always start with education to me, conservation as just being good Utahns.
Great. Speaking of education, let's talk about K through 12 and higher ed. One of the challenges that I hear from a lot of tech CEOs is not having enough of a pipeline to hire from the state. And it's not just engineers. It's a lot of companies need customer support people, or they need accountants, and they need product managers that don't always require that everybody needs to learn how to code. With that job growth and the tight labor market that we're seeing, how do you propose to address that, especially with your background in education already?
Yeah, these are such great conversations, and we've been doing this work on the higher ed board. Just a few months ago, we had a whole panel come from your end of the tech industry and speak to us about how can we be more responsive to what are the needs. We're in a pretty antiquated system, that we've had little disruption. And I think that's something that really the tech industry has helped all of us in so many levels, but particularly with education, on are we more nimble? How do we deliver those skill sets we need and get out of some of those historical pathways to higher ed and what it looks like? And so we have some really great ideas. We're really trying to work with the tech schools and be more seamless in that and what we deliver, and really a lot of attention on soft skills. We haven't paid enough attention to those kind of skills because we know our kids are graduating. They're not going to be in the same profession. They're not even oftentimes using the degree, but it's the step in the front door. But we need the other set of skills for them to be successful and be nimble and adaptable into whatever the market's driving, because we know it's moving so quick.
So we surveyed thousands of our tech employees here in the state. We're 1 out of 7 jobs, and we asked them what are their biggest concerns in living in Utah. And overwhelmingly, it didn't matter what role they were at the company. It didn't matter if they were a lifelong Utahn or had just moved here. It didn't matter, it just didn't matter. But overwhelmingly, the number one concern was air quality. And that was a little bit surprising to me. Also with that was job opportunities. It also included housing that's affordable. It included diversity and inclusion. And education was a big one as well. But let's talk a little bit about the air quality. And I'm not as familiar with the climate I know it's very hot where you live. But we do experience some really terrible air quality days. And there's kind of a joke that you don't bring people to Utah, in January, February, where there's some of the worst months. You certainly wouldn't bring recruits here at that time. Talk to me about what your thoughts are on air quality and how the state should be involved.
Well, running as a Republican conservative, this is really important to me. I don't know that our party has really owned it in the state. We're the dominant party in the way we do, but I see that changing. I just gave you examples of water. I was raised in Northern California, Santa Cruz. We were recycling 40 years ago. So this has just always been part of my come from. So I'm really quite surprised that we haven't addressed this more aggressively and that it's become such a problem. Living in Southern Utah, it just hasn't hit us. We have beautiful blue skies, 330 days a year, but I'm in Salt Lake a lot and I see the problem. And I think I would say it's the same idea as these levers we're talking about water, that we have to intentionally make some changes in our practices and our behavior, and that it can't be a divisive issue. It has to be something we have to come together and solve. And it's probably it is going to take more than just education and conservation. It's going to take some really serious intentions and maybe some adjustments to some of our core political beliefs. That's the only way we're going to get a solution with this. So I am always going to be and hold stronger probably than other Republicans in being good stewards of those resources. And air quality is one of the core resources we have. and we have to address it. And it's right in our party platform and needs to be highlighted and focused on with all other environmental issues.
Great, thank you. I want to switch a little bit. So the kind of the new thing that we're hearing a lot about, not that it's new, are ESGs. I think what would be your response to these social credit scores?
My response would be that I understand with these scores, the fear in our culture, and that my constituents are really fearful about this because it feels so unknown. But I also have to balance that with where the future is going and ways that move us forward in greater efficiencies. And so I'm always interested in those conversations, but at the same time, just must be respectful of the fear of the unknown right now. And I think as we get more education and more understanding, maybe we can have more conversations about that.
Tech has a kind of disdain for message bills, just because, there are real problems that we see in the state and real, work that needs to be done. And the message bills tend to be the most divisive and also the most ineffective in ways in solving some of these real problems. What's your stance on message bills in general?
Well, break down the question. What specifically are you wanting to know?
Let's talk about HB 60. So HB 60 was a bill that would prevent businesses from requiring vaccination of their employees. Our stance was let the businesses do what is best for the businesses. Obviously, people felt very differently. What are your thoughts on stuff like that?
Mine would be the same thing. Always let the business owner, let the private property owner, let the local municipality, let the local school board. I'm all about dialing in to keeping those rights as localized as possible, including who that business owner is in their business. So we saw with the Salt Lake Council and the mask mandate, this driving in and overriding. Because many of my constituents would have liked the result. And so they were okay with the means. I'm going to always try to dial in deeper and look at where do we really want that authority, and have less overreach is what I'm going to always be supportive of. Is how do we get those local people, that local business, that local private property owner, the local city council or school board, let them decide is kind of right. Now, there are obviously times where we need oversight and it comes in as a state issue. And at that point, that's where my role is going to come in.
Right. Is there anything else you want me to touch on?
Yeah, I just want to go back to, I have kids, I have daughters and kids in tech down here, and I've just seen how transformative it's been in my own family's lives, but also as the future. I see it as one of the lifelines, whether they go through traditional post-secondary or not, to our economy. And I think it's given such great gifts to our state and pushed us to grow in ways we wouldn't otherwise have done. I'm assigned to UVU, so I work with President Tuminas and was part of the group that hired her, and also Denise Huptelin. But I've seen what they have done as they've partnered higher ed with technology, and how influential that industry has been for Utahns. But as I called my girls, my tech people today, and they brought up one of these issues you did, which was the diversity. And as a Republican woman running in Southern Utah, there's never been a woman on the ballot. There's never been a woman in the House from Southern Utah. There's one from Carbon. We're pioneering our own diversity, and it's just plain gender. But these are really important conversations. And I particularly, this was my girls' number one concern, was they thought would be out of the workforce would be diversity and the expectation that we do better as Utahns.
So I think that's great that you talk about diversity. It is a huge priority for tech companies. Some of our tech companies have to publicly report their diversity numbers. And Utah doesn't simply have all the enough diversity in the state. And so it does require recruiting. And when we can show that we have inclusive policies, inclusive laws, inclusive companies, then that makes Utah a much more desirable state to move to. When we have laws on the books that are the opposite of that, even as a company owner, it doesn't matter what I do if the legislature goes and works against that. So, that's just something that we think quite a bit about here. So, tell me, Nina, how does the community reacting to the growth of Tech Ridge in the St. George area?
Yeah, it's still a little hush hush to many, but those who are in the know, there's of course in a community like this, a little bit of hesitation, and they're nervous about what does that mean? What are they doing to that whole ridge up there? What will these jobs bring with them? So, there's been a lot of growing pains in this community as you see the rapid growth. And so there's naturally this sense of change. And so that's been uncomfortable for some of our community members. But there's also this great energy and synergy down here happening. And the development of Tech Ridge, for those in the know and who really provide for our children, our economy, and our community, are really excited. They're coming in. I had an opportunity a couple months ago to spend a morning learning about it and what the plans were. And it's just going to be an incredible place with a lot of mixed use of housing and restaurants and just great synergy. But also those companies up there. I actually have a daughter who works up at Zonos right now, and just what's happening up there is so exciting. In fact, she moved from Kansas City and was able to come into, St. George, Utah, move home because of those tech jobs and what's being created. So the future is bright, and the city and those kind of partners are thrilled to death to see what's going to happen there. And it's going to be transformative for this region.